back to our PowerPoint. Now we're going to learn about something called equivalent units. This is very important. It is the purpose of Objective 3 is to learn about that and learn how to compute them. So first, let's start with an illustration so you can understand what that is. So let's suppose that you work in the office of the college president at a work-study job. And she asks you to compute the cost of instruction per full-time equivalent student at your college. The VP of Finance gives you the following information. The total cost of instruction is $9 million. They have 900 full-time students and 1,000 part-time students. So again, what they want you to do is something called a full-time equivalent student, which is how they're going to show you equivalent units here. And this really happens. This really happens. So they had 900 full-time students. Okay. Part-time students take 60% of the class load or the course load of a full-time student. And so even though we have 1,000 part-time students, they are only taking 60% of a full-time load. And so basically speaking, we have an equivalent of 600 more full-time students. So the total full-time equivalent students is 1,500, okay? And that's because we, in essence, converted or computed how to convert these 1,000 part-time students into full-time students, okay? So what is the cost of instruction per full-time equivalent? Well, they spent $9 million on instruction. We just figured out, basically, they have 1,500 full-time equivalent students. And so they're spending roughly about $600 on instruction per full-time student. Now, that's an important example because we're going to be doing that for products in this process, okay? So, and why so? Is because, well, finished goods are already done. And all of the products that are being made through the work in process stages are partially complete, only partially complete. So we will compute the equivalent of the ones that are done, okay? And that's basically how we process this. And we do that simply by using a basic weighting, weighted average of sorts. And this is a very popular and widely used method, okay? We do not use the beginning work in process. We only use the ending work in process. And so basically, that at the end of the process, there are units that are completed and ready to transfer out, which means they're ready to go to finished goods. So those are total units. However, what about the ones that are still in work in process? They're only partially done. So then the book will tell you the percentage of those units that are done. And it might be as simple as 50%, 20%, 80% done. And we calculate the equivalent units based on the ending work in process. And we simply add those two numbers together. That gives us an equivalent units of production. So this is an important illustration that you'll be using. So let's take a look. We have Corey Company Packaging Department. They have 10,000 units that are completed and transferred out. So these are done fully complete, right? And then they have another 5,000 units that are only 70% complete. So what are the equivalent units of production? Well, as we looked at earlier, it's going to be all the ones that are already complete, plus whatever we can mathematically compute for an equivalent here, which would be the 5,000 units times the 70%. That would be the equivalent. And so as your book shows you, 5,000 units at 70% completed would be equivalent to 3,500 units that are done. So the total amount that we can say for production is 13,500 units are basically been produced. Okay. So this is important. This is very, very important. Okay, let's take a look at another illustration here, which is from Kellogg. Let go of my ego. And we've been grabbing egos for since 1970. A lot of you weren't around. I remember them. I wouldn't have touched them. They look like cardboard, at that time. But they've improved clearly since then. And basically here, Kellogg's uses 3 departments to produce these Eggo waffles. So the first department is mixing. The second department is baking. Baking, not bacon, like type of pork, baking. My accent gets in the way, I apologize. And the last department is freezing and packaging. So it's freezing outside, so they must be outside and packaging. So the mixing department combines all those dry ingredients, flour, salt, baking powder, with the liquid ingredients like eggs and vegetable oil to make the batter. Okay, batter up. So let's take a look at some information from the mixing department. So in the mixing department only for June, they started with 100,000 waffles in work in process. They started 800,000 more. So the total amount of units that they have started is 900,000. Okay. They have completed and transferred out 700,000 of the 900,000. So 200,000 are still work in process. So how you read this is this 700,000 is done, completed. And what we need to know is of the 200,000 that are left, how complete are those? Right, because we need to compute an equivalent unit. Well, completion of a waffle in the mixing department is 2 things. We are going to find out how much of the materials have been used in the process of these 200,000, and all of the materials are in the waffles. You should hope so. Otherwise, your waffles are missing something. No eggs, right? Or no flour. Wouldn't be much of a waffle. So all the materials are in these 200,000. However, the conversion costs are basically labor and overhead. They only contain 60% of the costs that are involved to convert it in that department, to get it ready to be transferred out. So this is where everything is going to happen. Okay, this we know is already done. What we want to know of how many of this 200 is already done. So that you need to pay attention to. So here we go. Of the 700,000 that have been transferred out, everything is done. All of the materials are in, and all of the work is done, and overhead is done. Okay. However, for the ending work in process for June, now 200,000, well, all the materials are in the 200,000. So in essence, the equivalent number of Eggos based on materials alone is 900,000 Eggos have been completed in terms of the equivalent. However, only 60% of the 200,000 Eggos have it been fully converted, right, in terms of labor and manufacturing overhead. So 60% of 200,000 is 120,000. So in terms of conversion costs, we only have an equivalent of 820,000 waffles in equivalent units. So again, remember conversion costs here, this is new for you, I think. It's the labor plus the overhead versus materials is easy. You already kind of know what that, right? And again, beginning work in process is not part of how we calculate the units. And again, that's what we're doing here. Equivalent units, right? How many equivalent egos are they? They will not let go of their egos. Okay, so again, in terms of materials, 900,000 are done. In terms of conversion costs, we can say only 820,000 waffles are done. Okay, majorly incredible. Okay, let go of my ego. Another very important formula, give me the formula, Krebs, is looking at the equivalent units, okay, from another perspective. So let's take a look at this. This is in your book, Illustration 311. And it shows the looking at things from material perspective, equivalent units based on materials, and equivalent units based on conversion costs. So there's actually two numbers that we're coming up with. Okay. So again, the units completed and transfer out have all the materials in it. And the equivalent units in ending work of production have all the materials in it. So that's why they add up to the 900,000. 700,000 are already done. Of the 200,000 that are in progress, all 200,000 have all the materials. So that's why it's a full 200,000, and 900 is the answer here. However, for the ones that are being converted, obviously the ones that are done have already been converted. So all 700,000 waffles have been converted here because they're done. However, the waffles that are going through the mixing process in this department are only, I think there was 60% done, right? And so, yeah, 60% done. And so you have to then say, okay, of the 200,000 waffles that are in process, they're only 60% done. And so equivalent to the 120,000 waffles. So they're not 200,000 full waffles. They're equivalent to 120,000 waffles done, which is how they got the other number of 820. Okay. So that's going to be very important for you here. Okay. So here's a little extra question here. The mixing department's output for the period consists of 20,000 units completed and transferred out, and 5,000 units in ending work in process that are 60% complete to everything, materials and conversion costs. So they're only 60% complete for both categories. Okay. Beginning inventory is, okay, so we don't really care so much about the beginning inventory, right? So basically what we know is we have 20,000 units that are completed. That's where we're starting with, the 20,000. We're adding to that how many of these 5,000 units in the ending work in process are done, which they are 60% complete, right? So another 3,000. So basically that's why the correct answer here in terms of the equivalent units, how many actual units are being produced equivalently, 23 grand right here. All right, I'm gonna flip through this to get to the do it exercise for equivalent units. So this is also part of your homework between now and Thursday. Here we have the fabricating department, and I am not fabricating this at all. This is not made up, it's from the book. Okay. The fabricating department, Outdoor Essentials, has the following production and cost data for the current month. They have no beginning work in process. They have transferred out 15,000 units, and they have ending work in process of 10,000 units. So the materials are entered at the beginning of the process. The ending work in process are only 30% complete regarding conversion. So they want two things. One, what's the equivalent units for materials? And then for conversion. Well, in terms of materials, the materials are entered at the beginning of the process. So all of these obviously have all the materials in them because they're done. And of the 10,000 that are being worked on, the materials were the first things that happened. And so all of the materials are there. And so for part A, it's very simple that the equivalent units of production are all the units, the ones that are transferred out, plus the ones that are in any work in process, because all the materials are included in those. Okay. That's not true for conversion costs. Okay, that's not true for conversion costs. For conversion costs, obviously everything is completed in work into transferred out, so all of that has everything in it. However, the book tells us that of these ending work in process units, only 30% of them have all the conversion costs included. So only 30% of these would be part of the equivalent units for conversion costs, or 18,000 units. Okay. And that is objective 3. Questions?